You're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show.
You're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show. Your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you news from the local area and around the world. We bring Salford to the world and the world to Salford. The aim of the show is to increase awareness and participation of sport. We also have had the privilege of interviews from the world's best athletes, sports people, footballers, coaches, sports psychologists, you name it, from around the world. We also have a segment featuring some of the most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields who have been kind to share their thoughts in the area of psychology. Today we have a very special guest who's been involved on the show since its inception, from the very beginning, and has been a regular guest, who's kindly provided us with reports from around the world and the UK. Today she's going to give us an insight into going over to watch Roma and Lazio, the huge derby, the capital derby in Italy, and many listeners will be familiar with Lazio, with Paul Gascoigne's stint there, and obviously the English influence at Roma at the moment with Tammy Abrahams and Jose Mourinho being manager there. She's also going to talk about her beloved Bolton club and England's chances, according to her thoughts in the World Cup. She's one of the YouTube pioneers from the very beginning. She's sort of been a YouTube pundit and has travelled pretty much the four corners of the earth to report on football and related topics. Neve, StuntPegg, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Yeah, it's great to be on here again. Some really good talking points today. Fantastic.
And you went to Roma versus Lazio. The first time back to Italy for a while. Obviously, the sort of pandemic made it sort of challenging to get out there. But what was it like to be back in Italy, and what was the huge derby of the capital like?
Yeah, it was incredible. I've been wanting to get back out to Italy for a while. I wanted to do it when it was safe to do so, and this felt like the perfect time to do that. The capacities were increased. There's been a lot less supporters in stadiums in Italy over lockdown, but it's been increased up to 75% now, and Stadio Olimpico's big 70,000 capacity stadium, so there was thousands of supporters there, and the atmosphere was electric.
Wow. And the Stadio Olimpico you mentioned there, it's an iconic stadium in Italian football and has a history of long tradition. To watch Roma Lazio derby, which is in the hearts of the people in Rome, describe that experience, and what were your thoughts on the game?
I think for a lot of the supporters, it's as much about each set of ultras in the Curva Nord with the Lazio fans, the Curva Sud with the Roma fans. It's as much them having the best flags, the best chants, the more passion, the better words they speak, and there's a competition there and a rivalry there to represent the capital city of Italy. And then on the pitch as well, it's the players' job to give the club's pride, and you could really feel the energy, the desire, the players running that extra mile, even when they're tired. I think Tammy Abraham, you can see why he's so loved by Roma, because he worked so hard, and to score 2 goals as well, it's such an achievement for him, and you can tell that meant a lot to him. Yeah,
I mean, from what I see in the media, he's embraced life in Italy, and the Roma fans have taken to him. And so what would your sort of report card be for Tammy Abrahams, having sort of watched him? He scored 2 goals. I guess you can't do a lot more than that against us in the derby, but generally speaking, what would you say? How did he sort of play against Lazio?
I would say he played really well. What I would say about Tammy Abraham is I've never doubted that he's a really good poker striker, really good at positioning himself in the box. He's very clinical. He scored. He was Chelsea's top scorer in the season when he had to play in the first team as well. Yeah. I think Chelsea fans just worried, and the club just worried, would he be able to take it to the next level and score in those big matches and against the big clubs. But over in Roma, he's scored some really important goals. It doesn't get much bigger than this, and he's been very reliable for them. He's broken records, he's overtaken heroes at Roma for goal scoring, and he's doing exactly what a striker should do. His hold-up play is brilliant, and as a goal scorer, you can't get much better than him. Absolutely,
that's a great point, and I think that certainly when I signed Tammy Abrahams, I thought that was a bargain, really, in the sense that he's young and he's got goals in him, and a bright future ahead of him. That's for sure. And generally speaking, how was the performance in general? I mean, some of our older listeners will probably remember sort of Gascoigne at Lazio. Lazio were they're a big club as well, and had a lot of success in the Serie A in the 90s, and they'll remember from Gascoigne. But what would you say the standard was like, Niamh, in terms of, say, I know it's difficult to compare apples with pears, but where would you say the standard was like in a Serie A comparatively to, say, the Premier League, which at the moment seems to be, above and beyond any other league in the world?
I've always said this. I've always said that there's a real misconception that because the Premier League's so good, and I agree with that, there's this misconception that every other league is just like a level below. I disagree. I just think that the lower down you get in the top leagues across Europe, including Serie A, when you get to maybe the bottom 5-10 clubs, I do think the standard is less so than the bottom 5-10 clubs in the Premier League, because the investment and the money in those clubs is just it's incomparable. The amount that a team like Norwich can still spend in the Premier League compared to some of the teams that are struggling in Italian football. However, when you go further up the table and you go to Roma, Lazio, going above that, the Milan clubs, Juventus, Napoli, I think the quality there, they would be fine in the Premier League. And I thought the football, I mean, a manager like Mourinho, he's not going to Roma because they have got a good standard of football they could play. He sees something in the players at Roma, and it was a classic Mourinho performance from them. Scored the goals in the first half and then just set up defensively in the second half. And I'd say with Lazio, they had quality on the ball until it got to the final third. I think they just struggled to pick out what pass to make, and it's because Mourinho made it so difficult. But for Roma, what I really liked was that they had a clear tactical plan, they were organised, and they executed it perfectly with quality as well. And a performance like that would have done well against any club in European football.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And certainly in the sort of the Champions League and the I suppose you could argue the Italian teams have fallen a little bit short the last few years, but they've obviously still been sort of competitive. I suppose one sense is that for a long time, 80s and 90s, the Italian teams dominated Europe for a long period of time. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I think they were involved in 9 of the 10 Champions League's final in that period, something along them lines anyway. And I suppose the expectation, but from the perspective of, say, Italian football in general, we sort of saw Italy win the Euros. At this point, it's a pre-record. They haven't played the qualifiers yet. But did you sort of see any sort of hope for emerging talent? Italian football's there. Niamh, that's probably a little bit off-piste in terms of the remit of our conversation. But what are your sort of thoughts on some of the younger players, coming through, and the Italian players providing a platform for a successful national team?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Roma and Lazio, with a lot of the Italian clubs, I would say that they look to give opportunities to the youngsters. They're always looking to have them break into the first team. I think the under 23s across Serie A teams, there's always a high quality there. I'd say someone I really enjoy, this is sort of moving off a little bit, is from my watching Serie A this season, is Raspadori over at Sassuolo. And I can see a team like Roma, or perhaps a top 4 team in Serie A, trying to get him. He's only just 22.
Yeah, good point.
He's fantastic. He's got plenty of goals, plenty of assists, and he's just a really all-round good player. I think going forward, he's got all the qualities. He's the same age as me. He's got all these amazing qualities, and he's definitely someone that I'm excited to see what he can do. I think it's a position that Italy, going forward, have really craved and needed to finish off in recent years. So I'm really excited for what he can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point you make there, and I think that, like you've mentioned there, I think, particularly Roma, they've got some good players, and obviously Zaniolo, Spinazzola's injured at the moment. Zaniolo probably hasn't, because of injury, lived up to the sort of heights, that sort of the expectation, but there's still time to get there. But they're sort of interesting points. I think that that's the sort of key to play in a very competitive league, and obviously the Champions League is a big thing. But can you see maybe Roma get into that Champions League? Probably not this year, maybe a little bit too far away this year. But can you see them? Because on paper, they're a pretty strong team, to be fair. But can you see them with Mourinho next year, maybe squeezing into that top four?
Yeah, I think as the teams around, I think Atalanta they've had such a good few years, but they've got gradually more inconsistent every year in their results, and it's having an effect on them as they lose their best players every season. Their recruitment's always been good, but I think they're finding it more difficult to continue doing that, especially when a lot of Italian clubs will poach players from other Italian clubs as well, and they make their team and make yours weaker. Napoli, I think they'll really struggle. They're going through a transitional phase at the end of this season, and Roma have got stability with Mourinho, and they've got money to spend as well to add on to an already really good team where everyone there is enjoying their football. So it changes so dramatically sometimes in Serie A. One season the club can't get into the top six, and the next season they're challenging for the title. So I don't think that Roma would be silly to think that they could be a top four Champions League team even next season if they get a couple extra players in.
Absolutely, they've certainly got some strong players there, and you look at the team, the lineup, and think that's with Abraham, Zaniolo, Spinazzola comes back, and there's a lot of quality, Cristante, and there's so many good players in the team. That's for sure. Now we'll sort of go a bit closer to home, Bolton, your beloved Bolton, and there's plenty of listeners that have an interest in Bolton, that's for sure. And where do you see them at the moment, Neve? Bolton, it's been an interesting season for them. They seem to be winning ways at the moment. But what's your take on the Bolton situation?
I think it's been a really fantastic second half of the season. We wear teams down in games. The effort from the players, from everyone in the squad as well. We often make substitutions towards the end of games, and the players that come on will have an impact. Everyone's working really hard together, enjoying their football. Whether or not we can get to the playoffs, I think it's a little bit too little too late, but I think the playoffs would always have been a bonus in a season where we just wanted to establish ourselves in League One after the promotion last season. But 8,000 supporters have already bought season tickets for next season. I think that really shows the positivity around the club at the moment and the job that Ian Everett's doing. Absolutely.
There's some great points, really. So there's every reason to be optimistic, you think, for the Bolton fans. They're do you think, Neve, they're sort of challenging now? They certainly look very competitive. And do you see that there's reason for optimism for our Bolton fans listening?
100%, because the owners, Sharon Britton, the consortium, they've got our best interests, and everything off the pitch is going really well. And we've seen proof now over the 2 seasons that the manager's been in charge. We've seen that he knows how to recover seasons, he knows what players to bring in, he's got good recruitment, and he knows how to get the most out of players, and he's got different tactical approaches to games as well, which in those lower leagues is so crucial, that you can play different ways of football on the pitch. So we've got loads of stuff to be positive about.
Absolutely, and loads of stuff to be positive about the England team as well. It's this, just maybe under a year ago, you were watching it at Wembley. You sort of followed many of the England games all the way to the final, and we saw England in the Euros. Probably could have won, and obviously penalty shootout, it was close. They played some great football under Southgate, and I from what I can see from the outside looking in, they seem to have improved, they seem to have moved forward. But I want to know your thoughts. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously, and also with yourself, really. I mean, you had the experience of the Raise You game as well, the documentary, or Raise You game, and you sort of managed to get up close to Southgate. What's your thoughts on how they've progressed, and what's your thoughts on how has Southgate moved the team forward? I mean, at this point it's a pre-record, they haven't played any friendlies, but we've sort of seen the squad. What's your take on that, Neve?
Yeah, I'd say my take on it is with the young players that he's worked with, the players that have got into squads, he works really well with them. I think it's no surprise that his involvement with the England under-21s, he seems to have a really good relationship with the younger players and knows how to get the most out of them. And I think what's really good about Southgate is he's not just England football team manager, he's taken responsibility of across the country in terms of meeting up with people like myself who have things that we want to change in the game. For me, it's about giving more facilities and access to young women wanting to get into coaching or football. And he's gone across into London and he spoke to young Philly about racism in football. He's taken it upon himself to really try and help the supporters as well as the players. And I really like how modern this England team is and the setup. I think it's really inclusive and great. But I wouldn't say it's without fault all the time, and I do still think it's important to talk about some of the things that we would maybe change. And I think the England squad, the most recent one, I'm not sure it's really given credit to some of the players that have been in form this season, and I would say a few players in there that have been picked where it's very notable for me.
Absolutely, and I suppose you're always going to disappoint some players, and there'll always be people who've got different opinions, and that's what makes the game great. I suppose from looking from the outside in, Southgate tends to sort of stay with the players, the sort of tried and trusted players he's played before, and going into sort of World Cup, I mean, there's going to be opportunities to play friendlies, that's for sure, between now and then, and for England. And I suppose after the Euros, there's a lot of optimism about England. You look at the squad, Neve, and they're formidable. There's some great players in that squad. There really is, and there's players in that squad that can get into any team in the world. I think, from that perspective, it's probably the most exciting period for English football for a long time. But realistically, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of permutations and variables have got to go your way in a tournament, that's for sure. But on paper, looking at now, it's a long way out as well. Depends who's on form at the time as well, and injury and everything else. But as things stand, do you think England has a chance? Can they sort of, and we'll talk about this sort of nearer the time as well, but as things stand at the moment, do you think they've got a shout at the World Cup?
Absolutely. I think a really good indicator of it is, at the moment, as we both talked about, the Premier League is at the very top, at the very peak. Of course, we've still got 3 English clubs in Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City in the Champions League. As we get closer to the end, you look at the last previous seasons in the Champions League, English clubs have been in the final, the semi-finals, and really stormed it. And across those English clubs, there is so much English talent as well. And something as well that I think so notable about these England squads is the amount of good quality players across the league that are getting in. There's more Crystal Palace players in this squad than there are Manchester United players. There's so much talent that's being nurtured and playing football consistently every single week and getting better and better. And the options that we've got as a whole squad, there's first 11s that you could argue are better than England, but I think as a whole squad, you'd really find it difficult to find a better set of 24 players going out to a World Cup. And so
good shout, yeah.
A weak underdog that could win it, we should look at it and think really we're one of the favourites that ought to get in far.
And it's really interesting you say one of the favourites, and I suppose it's living with that sort of that tag of being one of the favourites. Can the players handle that sort of pressure, the media sort of going in there as favourites? I mean, the last tournament certainly were one of the favourites, that's for sure, after making the semis in the World Cup, that's for sure. And they seem to handle that well. Neve, what's your perception of the players? You think going into a tournament as favourites, they're going to be okay with that? They're young players, but now they're obviously, they've been around the scene for a while. Can they handle that, do you think?
I think that's one of the things that I think they can handle. I think a lot of these players have won stuff at their respective clubs,
absolutely.
And they have their favourites every week. I think where things can be difficult for them, and it's always been the case of England, is when things don't go exactly the supporters' way and they get on their back straight away. I think a good example of that was at the Euros. We had such a good tournament there, but we drew 0-0 with Scotland, and already everyone was going crazy and mad that we've helped happen, and in the grand scheme of things, it was a good result that kept us going. And the top teams do have results like that, and it's a hard game to play against a local rival.
Absolutely.
It's important that the fans are patient with them, because this England team, a lot of the players will be the same, have given us a semi-final World Cup and a final Euros, and if we want to keep pushing them and see more from them, we've got to really get behind them.
Absolutely, and I can see England being competitive for a long time to come. Yeah, there's a lot of excellent young players coming through. The league's it's a very competitive league, probably the most competitive league in the world at the moment. So there's every reason to be optimistic, and I suppose with any tournament, but like you said, there's no easy games in international football, and irrespective of who you play, when players are playing for their country, they're out there giving it their all, and that's for sure. Sometimes you've got to be patient and grind out a result as well. That's for sure. I suppose we sort of need to touch on the Premier League. At the moment, there's an interesting, intriguing. I have to say, I wouldn't say surprised. Obviously, I'm aware of Liverpool's quality, and they've got a great manager and great setup. But I felt at one point City might, if not run away with it, but maybe be more comfortable than what is at the moment. But what's your take on the Premier League? City or Liverpool? What's going to happen? Who's going to win it?
Oh, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because they both seem to take each other to new levels. I think Man City and Liverpool in these last few years, as it continues, I do believe it will go down as one of the greatest on the pitch rivalries in the English game. The quality of football they both provide on a consistent basis, just astonishing. And I'd say, personally, I think it's so funny. I was looking at the teams that they both got to play. Obviously, they both play each other, and I'll be down there watching that as well. And at the Etihad, and Man City have got a really good record against Liverpool in the Etihad. They've not lost to them for 5 years now at the Etihad, so they'll be hoping to carry on with that, and whatever the outcome there, it could be the decider really. So late in the season, I can't see either of the teams dropping that many points to anyone else, and Liverpool's run's harder than Man City's run, but Liverpool's quality is much, is so strong. They beat Arsenal comfortably, who are high flying at the moment. The fight against Manchester United, so it almost doesn't matter who they play. They've got the quality to smash anyone really, and both of them have. So it's so hard to pick out, but I think I'd go with Man City because of their form against Liverpool at the Etihad. I think they're more likely to get a win there, and then I also think their running is just slightly easier now, so they're more likely to pick up points, and they are in the driving seat as well, and they've been so good at keeping their place at the top in the driving seat under Pep Guardiola for years now.
Absolutely, and we could have a trilogy in terms of the FA Cup semi-final, the league, and the Champions League. Wouldn't that be a turn up if they, obviously they're going to play each other in the league and the FA Cup semi-final, but do you think there's a chance they might play each other in the Champions League? One going for the quadruple and one going for the. I'm sure if Pep and Klopp are listening, they won't be too pleased at sort of me mentioning quadruples and trebles. But is it possible? Do you think that they could be playing in the Champions League final?
Let's just say that Manchester United fans will be absolutely hating it every single minute. Okay, knowing that whatever happens, one of their arch rivals will be.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
To achieve, but I think they're more than capable of getting to the final. Some really tough games though to get there. I think even if Liverpool beat Benfica, who are a quality team, they're going to have to play a team like Bayern Munich. So there's a long way to go before that stage, but it is exciting for Liverpool fans because they're still in everything. And the opportunities that they have this season, and of a team that could do it and a manager that could do it, I certainly think that you don't get much better than Klopp and those players. It's
interesting you're saying. I mean, sort of we saw Real Madrid also in the mixer as well, and we sort of see the Ancelotti factor, and he obviously came out to Everton, and you could say that he did reasonably okay, and on the face of it now, season Everton's had, and so it's sort of, I think Ancelotti, to be fair, he sort of seems to have found his fit in Madrid as well, and I know you sort of have an interest in Spanish football as well. And what's your take on Real Madrid? Are you surprised Ancelotti sort of got him? Obviously not a great result recently, but generally speaking, he's on course to win a league there and still in the Champions League. What's your take on Ancelotti factor over in Madrid?
Yeah, I think that with Ancelotti, he's as a coach. There's managers out there that I've always felt you cannot ever criticise what Ancelotti's achieved in the game, but as an actual coach, I'd expected someone who was more of a coaching manager that side to manage a club like Everton. But then Rafa Benitez, I think many would say he is more of a coach than Ancelotti, and really struggled there. So the job Ancelotti did at Everton, sort of keeping everything together and the foundation that was so fragile, it actually, in hindsight, was not a bad job at all, really, that he was doing. And it's as much about morale as anything. I think Carlo Ancelotti is one of the best in terms of keeping the positivity of players and supporters at a club and having a level of stability, maybe. And the job he's doing at Real Madrid with top class players, he's very, very good at handling top class players. He's shown that all his career as a manager. And I would say they're a team that, before a ball was kicked, I came out and said on my channel they're the team to watch, the team people will rate, because they've got a lot of younger players now in that team, and maybe a few. It's not the Real Madrid of late. They've not got Varane, Ramos, Ronaldo that they've had in a few years. They've lost some of their core players, but they've still got Benzema there, Militao, that ancient midfield that will keep going forever, in Kroos and Modric, and they are a team that can play anyone on the pitch. Performance against PSG, they really shocked PSG, who I think just really panicked and struggled against the quality of Madrid.
Absolutely. Speaking of Ronaldo there, you saw him on his return, first game back to United. What's your sort of report card on what you've seen of Ronaldo thus far? I mean, he scored 3 goals the other week, and yeah, obviously, he's at the age where we're not expecting him to sort of, light the world on fire, so to speak, but obviously his contributions have been. But what's your take on sort of Ronaldo, and where do you see United going in terms of managers? You've managed Ancelotti, obviously there's a number of managers linked to the United job. What's your take on Ronaldo, and what do you see in terms of United manager next season?
With Ronaldo, I think that United knew what they were going to get if they signed a player like that. They were going towards, with under Oli, they were going towards a certain way of playing, and then they brought Ronaldo in who just completely doesn't fit at all what they were going towards, so they had to change everything really to accommodate him. There was a really interesting stat that I'd seen about Ronaldo in terms of running per match, and a lot of forwards that run about 11, 12, 13 kilometres a game, and Ronaldo was down there at 9.
Wow.
And that's a real indicator of him in terms of, and what they say in top football now is you have 10 players on the pitch that have to always be behind the ball when you're off the ball. And there's no one is away from that. All the top strikers, there's no number 9s in football as much anymore. They've got to get behind the ball, and he's not willing to do that. And there's been times where his body language really not impressed me in terms of his frustration and petulance, and the younger players up on that. But in terms of his goal scoring and the important goals that he scored, they wouldn't have got out the group stages in the Champions League without him.
Yeah.
And some of the games they've won in the league as well. And I do feel for him in a way, because what it used to be with United, they were a goal scoring team with the way they were playing last season. They were creating maybe 10 to 15 chances and scoring 3 or 4. Whereas this season, because they've got Ronaldo, it's almost like they feel that they don't have to create as many chances, and he'll get 1 or 2 per game, and they'll expect him to score every single one. So he doesn't look clinical, but the truth is he's just not getting that ball that much at all. He took 2 touches in the opposition half against Manchester City when they lost in the derby, the first game. So it shows really that the system that they had in place, it just wasn't suited to Ronaldo, yet they had to fit Ronaldo in. It's always going to be a recipe for disaster in my opinion, but and I don't think it's gone to plan. And whatever manager they bring in next season, whether it's Pochettino, Ten Hag, they want someone young, I think, someone different. Whoever they bring in, it has to be, they have to make the decision, the brutal decision, will Ronaldo be in at United still? Is that going to be good enough for us on the pitch? But then I wonder if Manchester United, the board, would want Ronaldo to go because they love the marketing side of it. He'll bring them in a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that's some important points there. And I think certainly Ronaldo, one of the great players of this generation and all generations really, phenomenal player. He's a winner, that's for sure. And yeah, we've seen him frustrated this season. I suppose that frustration probably is he's sort of used to winning, and also he's winding down the clock. I mean, whichever way you look at it, he's done remarkably well to carry on playing to the level he's been playing at the age he is, and who is me or anyone to doubt he'll sort of carry on and keep going. But age, I suppose, gets us all to a point, and maybe Ronaldo 5 years ago would have been a different story, Neve. But as it stands, I think it's just accepting that he's sort of maybe more of an impact player now, I sense, or maybe next year could be used that way. But either way, my suspicions are I think United do need a number of players to come in. What's your take on that? I mean, I think it's maybe not more evolution, not revolution, but they do need a number of players to come in and sort of freshen things up and maybe adopt a different style of football.
It's not just Ronaldo that is a part of maybe a different direction. One thing with Ronaldo as well is he's always challenged himself. He's never gone for the easy option when he went to Juventus and now to United. He's 37 years old and he could have gone anywhere he wanted to go and fit right into that team and score loads of goals, and he chose a club that it would be difficult with and gave himself that challenge, and you can understand why his frustration himself, a player with that magnitude of career. But for United perspective, it's not just that. They've got Cavani still on the books, who's barely played for him this season since Ollie left, who set up promises with Cavani. The new manager maybe hasn't set up those promises, and Cavani really played all too often. Rashford's going to be a big decision for them because his quality's just not been good enough, so it's up to them to, because he just looks a bit like he's fallen out of love with football, which is really sad to see, and the fact that United to either refine that or find someone else in that position. Matic as well is a much older player. Maguire is someone they spent all that money in but doesn't seem to be at that level, so there's so many positions where they're going to really need to reinvest if they want to bridge the gap on the teams at the top. I think it's going to take a very long time.
Yeah, I think so, and I think the sort of added pressure of sort of City at the moment and Liverpool, obviously, like you've mentioned before, Liverpool are huge traditional rivals that sort of span back a long time. City, obviously, there's always been that rivalry there, but you could argue that City, it's the last few years that the rivalries have intensified. But I think that sort of added pressure, United sort of falling away, and United's one of the biggest clubs in the world, and for certainly for me, I think with Manchester United, they are a huge club, if not the biggest club in the world. It's certainly up there, and the expectations are high. And to sort of go out there and challenge for United should be really challenging for the league and the Champions League at the moment. And I've got to admit, from what I've seen, you've seen more of them than me this season. They look nowhere near challenging for the league or the Champions League.
Yeah.
Nowhere near it.
No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. They're really far behind, and I think the countless chopping and changing of managers and the managers they go for. One thing you'll notice about the managers that they have brought in, and since David Moyes, they've always been managers who have been at the end of contracts or they're freely available. They're not with clubs. They always seem to go for that easy option with Van Gaal, with Mourinho at the time, and of course now with Ralph Rangnick, who didn't have a club. They've gone for managers that were just available and there to pick up. Instead, you look at Liverpool, who obviously got Klopp whilst he was at Dortmund, and Guardiola whilst he was Bayern, went to Manchester City. Tuchel was at PSG when he went to Chelsea. So these are high-level managers that were at the top whilst they were managing.
Prize across,
to give what they could to them, whereas United have gone for managers who they have no one at that point. Nobody wants them at that point, and so they've gone for them because they can. And you almost think you're not looking at long-term success there at all. You're looking at short-term, and you're going to get nowhere in football doing that. Yeah,
it's a difficult one, I suppose. You sort of go for who's available at the time, the best you can get at the time. And one of the things for United now, I think what's going to make it even more difficult, as it stands, it's looking unlikely they're going to qualify for the Champions League. But funny things have happened in football, and never can write United off, that's for sure. But that's going to be a big draw card to, for any manager who wants to sort of manage in the sort of Champions League. That's one thing for sure. But you'd like to think that United as a club, the infrastructure, there's no bigger club or in the world really that they should be able to entice someone to come across and hopefully return them back to the the former glory. It may not be the same as it was before. Obviously, these sort of new kids on the block now in terms of Liverpool's, like you said, resurgent under Klopp and City with Guardiola are probably going to be strong for a long time to come yet, but we shall see. And yourself, sort of going forward, what are some of the things you're looking forward to? I mean, you're involved in a lot of things. You do a lot of travel. You've been to Spain, to Italy, all around the UK, you've covered some huge matches. You've been over to Ibrox. You've sort of to Madrid, to Rome. It doesn't get much bigger than that. You've been to United, so the City, Liverpool. What are the things you're looking forward to covering in the next few months?
At the moment, I've been putting it to my viewers to make decisions on games. I've been looking out for matches that perhaps are hidden gems, maybe looking to travel to countries that there's not been content in those countries to give some new insights into different rivalries, maybe in the Irish League, into Poland.
Yeah.
I've been looking into Serbia. There's all sorts of incredible rivalries and games and supporters out there that us as English supporters we don't see all too well on television, and it's a chance to really get insight into it because there's so many passionate supporters all across Europe in football, and in this country too. We've got some huge games coming up all across the 4 leagues. You've got the playoffs coming up too as well soon, the Championship League 1 and 2, which is always a really nice event. And yeah, just I'll be there at loads of big games and just soaking in supporters and showing them off really.
Absolutely, certainly do showcase. The channel certainly showcases the football, but also the atmosphere, captures the sort of the ambience of the occasion as well. And for our listeners who are interested to sort of find more about your channel, and can you sort of share, your channel details or any sort of any way they can sort of hop on? And I know plenty of our listeners do watch your channel, but for the ones who don't, can you give some details out, Neve, how they can sort of tune in?
Yeah, so I'm mainly on YouTube at StuntPegg, but I'm also on Twitter as well and Instagram, also StuntPegg there, and I'm constantly posting videos on YouTube, pictures on Twitter and Instagram of wherever I go, and very active on there.
Fantastic. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. It's been really interesting and informative. No doubt the listeners have really enjoyed your experience, listening to your experience in Roma, your thoughts on Bolton and England, and amongst many other things. So we wish you all the best going forward, and know that you'll be back on the show sooner rather than later, talking football again. That was StuntPegg, Neve StuntPegg, the YouTube channel. Go check it out. I haven't checked it out before. Speaking all things football, she's been an instrumental part of the show, the Friday Sports Show, from the very, very beginning. This keeps going from strength to strength. An ambassador for the game. That's for sure. So that's 94.4 FM, Friday Sports Show, 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio Friday Sports Show. Host Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing news from the local area and around the world.